Welcome back to the class. Uh, in the previous sessions, we concluded uh, some discussions on Marxian critique on capitalism, a very important theory considered to be the central contribution of Karl Marx. And today, we are going to discuss yet another very important and influential intervention of Karl Marx through his analysis of alienation. And this concept has really attracted the attention of a wide spectrum of scholars, starting from political scientists, philosophers, sociologists, and a host of other people, as a very, very important intervention of Karl Marx in his attempt to understand the human condition in the modern times. And this term alienation, it is still important because even in this contemporary era of late modernity, discussions about alienation, discussions about human beings feeling kind of estranged from their own society, human beings feeling kind of worthless in this particular society. Human beings are not able to find meanings in their existence. So these terms are these kind of concerns are discussed and debated heavily even in the contemporary times. So of course, this is not a term invented or discovered by Karl Marx. It is not his original contribution. He improvised upon the Hegelian understanding of alienation, but the kind of a material take that Karl Marx provided to this particular understanding or this particular term is something quite interesting. We will see that how he borrowed this particular idea. He was heavily influenced by Hegel, especially during his youthful period, and most of his writings of especially on alienation with its philosophical moorings appear in the early career of Karl Marx. So it's a very fascinating theme. Marx derived the concept from Hegel, transforming it from an essentially idealist to a materialist and critical concept. So this is one of the most important points that we need to keep it in mind. This is not an original concern developed by Karl Marx in his youthful period. There were quite a lot of discussions and debates about this concept of alienation. But most of these discussions and debates were philosophical in its character, especially influenced by the arguments of Hegel, George Hegel, whom we have discussed earlier. So Hegel understood it basically as an idealist concept, but as typically as what we have seen in the previous class, Marx was heavily influenced by Hegel, but Marx provides a completely materialist interpretation to that of this particular term. So this kind of a subversion from an idealist understanding, from a philosophical understanding, from an idealist understanding of this term, Marx provides a very strong materialist explanation to this particular concept. For Marx, alienation is described as a process by which man is progressively turned into a stranger in the world his labor has created, a theme central to Hegel's phenomenology. Okay? So this term, Hegel explains, it elaborates it in his work Phenomenology. But for Marx, what is the most important concern, or what is the most important or crucial aspect, or even something can be called as a tragedy in the life of human being, is that the man or human being is progressively turned into a stranger in the world in which he himself has created. Okay? Because we will see that, or you must be by now familiar that Marx provides, or Marx gives profound importance to human labor. He understands the speciality, the uniqueness of human beings lies in their ability to produce labor, to engage in labor. So the world that we are seeing today is the product of human labor. But ironically, in this world, which is a creation of their own labor, human beings have become stranger. Human beings do not feel comfortable in that. Human beings do not feel, or human beings are not able to identify themselves with their own product. And this, according to Marx, is a very, very difficult situation. So it is also the theme of Feuerbach's Essence of Christianity, which exercised a profound impact on Marx's earlier works, helping him to translate Hegel's idealist structures into materialist ones. So these are the two major influences on Marx. Feuerbach's work on Christianity, which we will again discuss when we discuss Marxian notion of or Marxian critique of religion, and of course the Hegelian understanding of alienation as elaborated in his work Phenomenology. For Hegel, alienation is a manifestation of unhappy consciousness. This is a very important argument. As in the case of any idealist, Hegel understood that the root cause of alienation, why that Hegel understands that, or Hegel acknowledges that quite a lot of people, human beings in this contemporary society, feel estranged, okay, feel distanced from their own world. But Hegel found the root cause as something lies in the consciousness of human being, that lies in the realm of ideas. So he understood alienation as a manifestation of an unhappy consciousness. It refers to the finite individual's self-consciousness, which mistakenly conceives of its own spiritual essence as being outside it and opposed to it. It regards itself as inessential, empty, worthless, devoid of true reality or significance. So here Hegel understands that the human beings are experiencing alienation because of the kind of an incapacity of the human being itself in order to understand the true essence. So attaining this true essence is what Hegel understands as the epitome of human progress. Because for him, the understanding human progress lies in the ability of human beings to reach some of the highest forms of consciousness. So it refers to the finite individual's self-consciousness, which mistakenly conceives of its own spiritual essence as being outside it. Okay, because it understands it wrongly. It is not able to realize that its actual essence is a part of this finite individual self-consciousness itself. It regards itself as inessential, empty, worthless, devoid of true reality or significance. So Hegel understands alienation as resulting from some kind of a faulty understanding, some kind of an incomplete understanding. For Hegel, unhappy consciousness is an important step in human history because for the first time in the unhappy consciousness, spirit's particularity in the form of an individual human person first becomes an object of awareness. So as we discussed in the previous class, Hegel understands this transformation of humanity, transformations of human society as a transformation realized through the advancements in the ability of human beings to think, the kind of the development of various ideas that human beings are able to understand and then nurture with them. So Hegel understands this kind of a development is an essential development. It's a necessary development because this is for the first time that the unhappy consciousness, that is the spirit's particularity in the form of an individual human person, first becomes an object of awareness. So human beings try to reflect about this whole situation, and then it becomes an object of awareness. The alienation of the unhappy consciousness is just a matter of finite spirit's imperfect knowledge of its own infinite essence. So ideally, Hegel would argue that human beings is a part of the infinite essence or the higher spirit that he understands, but the human beings are not able to really understand that. They are in a kind of a false consciousness, not in the Marxian sense, but they are really not able to understand the true situation as per Hegelian understanding. The only remedy for alienation is the attainment of a higher stage of self-knowledge, where God and humanity are seen to be fundamentally in harmony. We discussed in the previous session that Hegel was a believer, and his Hegelian philosophy was heavily influenced by Christianity. So for Hegel, a person will be able to come out of alienation only when he or she realizes the oneness of human being with that of the God. The only remedy for alienation is the attainment of a higher state of self-knowledge, where God and humanity are seen to be fundamentally in harmony. Okay? So it's again, human beings are suffering. Human beings are feeling this deep sense of estrangement because they are not able to understand that in reality they and the God are essentially in harmony and they share the similar kind of spirit. So Hegel understands the root cause of alienation as residing in the inability of human beings to understand certain things, again at the realm of ideas. Hegelian idea that human beings are unable to realize their self-actualization due to a series of negations in their existence, as in the case of his dialectical idealism. So this self-actualization is not yet realized, and it's basically due to a series of negations in their existence. And of course, this idea was original to Hegel, and at the same time, Marx also has a very interesting engagement with Feuerbach, a very important scholar whom we again mentioned when we discussed the intellectual influences in Marxian life. So Feuerbach's theory of religious alienation also heavily influenced by Hegel, but Feuerbach also was not a believer. He was critical of religion, but there is a very interesting difference between Feuerbach's critique of religion and Marxian critique of religion, which we will discuss in the coming session. So Feuerbach criticizes Hegel's notion of an abstract spiritual world as it is similar to religion, established the anthropological explanation of religion. So Feuerbach was not a believer, so he did not believe in anything divine about the religion. Rather, he used the anthropological explanation, some kind of anthropological explanation, why that human beings or religion is a universal institution, why that every society you will find some or the other sort of religion. So he tried to provide an anthropological explanation of religion, did not agree with that of Hegelian understanding of religion. So according to Feuerbach, humans unwittingly project essence to God, assign non-human qualities, makes human beings look imperfect in comparison, and lead a life in accordance to the regulations imposed by the God. It's a very, very interesting explanation. So Feuerbach argues that human beings unwittingly project human essence to God, assign non-human qualities, makes human beings look imperfect in comparison, and lead a life in accordance to the regulations imposed by the God. So Feuerbach argues that the human beings project human essence to God, and also assign non-human qualities, a whole set of qualities that are beyond the purview of human beings are attributed to God. God is omnipresent, he is omnipotent, and he can decide people's life. He can hold he can completely define and then decide the destiny of each and every individual. He can control the nature. So a host of non-human qualities and abilities are attributed to the God, and then in comparison with the God, you realize that you are very, very insignificant. Make human beings look imperfect in comparison and lead a life in accordance to the regulations imposed by the God. In essence, as I mentioned earlier, this is a kind of an anthropological explanation. Why that human beings require the figure of a God. So essentially, Feuerbach is arguing that the human beings attribute these kind of non-human or superhuman abilities to God, and then look down upon themselves and then lead a more regulated life, imposed by the God. Religion is thus the disuniting of human beings from themselves. So Feuerbach also is critical of religion. So but the explanation is quite different. But Marx criticizes Feuerbach, while Marx agrees with Feuerbach to a large extent, because Marx does not agree with Hegelian's idealist argument. Religion does not have anything divine about it, and Marx agrees with Feuerbach that it is a social phenomenon, but Marx also has his fair bit of criticism against Feuerbach. Marx agrees with Hegel and Feuerbach that alienation is closely associated with certain kinds of false consciousness about one's essence. Agreed? Because both Hegel and Feuerbach argues that people do not really understand the true reality. Where in the case of Hegel, it's because they are not able to realize that they share the essence with the supreme spirit. Whereas in the case of Feuerbach, human beings realize that the God of human beings do not realize that the God is a creation of themselves. So Marx criticizes Feuerbach for not looking at the development of religion in a historical sense. Okay? Of course, this kind of what what Feuerbach provides also is a kind of a materialistic, it's an anthropological explanation, but it's not really rooted in a historicity. So alienated consciousness laments that natural human life is alienated and it can be overcome if we place on the right supernatural interpretation. For Marx, unhappy consciousness tells the truth it laments, not in its consolations. It's a very interesting argument. So Marx argues that alienated consciousness laments. Laments means it cries that the natural human life is alienated and it can be overcome if we place in it the right supernatural interpretation. Okay? So we that human beings lead a very miserable life, and especially the alienated people, they don't find any meaning or happiness in their life. They all the time lament about this lack of certain thing, lack of importance, lack of being able to find certain higher meanings in their life. Okay, so this alienated consciousness lament that natural human life is alienated and it can be overcome if we place on it the right supernatural interpretation. Okay? But for Marx, this unhappy consciousness, which laments about its own alienation, about its own sense of estrangement, its own sense of not being important, its own sense of not being able to identify with the world in which somebody lives, tells the truth it laments. So Marx argues that there is a truth. It's not a false consciousness. Okay, it's not an illusion for Marx. It is real. Okay, but the consolation that it tries to look for, okay, or the kind of a consolation that it tries to achieve by falling at the feet of a god, or its consolation by trying to appeal to the religion or try to depend upon the religion, is not what is correct, or that is a fundamentally wrong step as per Marx. And in this work, the Economic and Philosophic Manuscripts, 1844, Marx criticizes Hegel for locating the oppositions and negations that cause the estrangement of man in abstract philosophical concepts, and argues that they be located in the material world, especially the economic realities. So Marx, he brings forth his sharp materialistic turn, or his sharp materialistic argument that the kind of, if people in general, if a society in general, or are experiencing a sense of estrangement, if they experience a sense of not being worthy, then it has to be, the root cause has to be analyzed in the material world, especially in the economic realities, and not in certain kind of realms of ideas, not in certain kind of realms of beliefs and other things. Now, so he very strongly argues that the reason for this thing, the sense of alienation must be sought in the material, especially the economic. And as we know that this goes along with the larger Marxian argument that the economic base is the one which actually provides the fundamental basis on which all other aspects of human beings. So Marxian notion of human nature. Now, here Marx resorts to a kind of a larger philosophical explanation about human nature. So, one of the most important aspects that Marx argues here is a discussion about what he understands it as a very essential nature of human beings. I have mentioned it several times. What is that something defines human beings? Or what is that something demarcates human beings from other animals or other species? What is something so unique about human beings? And as per Marxian explanation, it is their ability to labor. It is their ability, their laboring activity is the one which actually distinguishes human beings from other animals or other species in the world. Because no other animal, you know that human beings are not the fastest, they are not the strongest, they are not in terms of physical ability, human beings are absolutely vulnerable. There are a host of other animals in the world who are much faster, much stronger, than human beings. But why that human beings are able to control the whole world? And that is because their laboring activity, their intellectual ability to, their ability to combine their intellectual their intellect with that of the tools and ability to produce. So it helps to exert control over nature. It's a source of human existence, and it is also a very important source of human self-definition. So this laboring activity, the ability of human beings to produce certain thing, according to Marx, is something so fundamental to their self-definition. How a human being defines himself or herself is something so closely connected with the way in which he or she engages in this kind of a laboring activity. So a typical Marxian explanation, the way in which the human beings work, human beings engage in productive activity is something so central, not only for meeting their basic requirements, but even to have a definitive sense of themselves, definitive definition of themselves. So Marx defines alienation as a process whereby exchange value comes to dominate use value, in which the worker increasingly defines historically specific capitalist social relations as natural and inescapable. I hope you remember the discussion we had about exchange value and use value, and he discusses that in the pre-capitalist economic transaction, it was the use value which had more prominence, whereas in the capitalist era, it is the exchange value which continues to be the dominant one. So Marx argues that in the exchange value comes to dominate use value. This is where he also develops his theory about this fetishism of commodities, in which the worker increasingly defines historically specific capitalist social relations as natural and inescapable. So Marx argues that human beings define this particular period of capitalist economy as per Marxian argument that it is only a transient, it's only a temporary one. It is not a permanent situation, because Marx believed that capitalism will crumble under its own weight, under its own under its own contradictions, and a new classless society will emerge. But the workers or the ordinary human beings do not consider it that way. They consider it as natural and inescapable. And so Marx, delineates a kind of couple of more specific ways in which human beings experience this alienation. Marx talks about alienation from the product, lacks of ownership of means of production. Products enter in the system of exchange, creates no value. So one of the important points that we discussed so far is about, especially about the capitalist system, is that human beings the workers do not own the means of production. The means of production are owned completely by the bourgeoisie, and human beings are only, or the workers are only forced to sell their labor. So in a capitalist system, the workers do not own the means of production, and the product enters into a system of exchange, creates no use value. So, this is something quite familiar to us. And Marx gives the example of a potter who owns the soil, who owns the potter's wheel, who is involved in the production of a pot by himself, and he sells it to somebody, and he is able to see that that pot is being made use by the person. So that provides a deep sense of gratification, deep sense of satisfaction to the person who created it. Whereas in a capitalist era, a worker does not even know what he's producing, because most of the time the worker must be producing a small fraction of a large product, or his individual contribution into a large assembly line could be very minuscule. It will be extremely limited. So human beings are not able to identify themselves with the kind of product that they are producing. And then alienation from the productive activity. How this whole experience of producing certain things, how that can be quite alienating. Marx argues that human beings lose control over the capacity of laboring activity to affirm their being and define their self-existence. This activity of producing certain thing is so central to Marxian argument. It's not a mechanical thing that you do certain thing and get some money. But Marx argues that human beings really identify themselves. Human beings really discover themselves, define themselves in the process of this production. But in a capitalist era, human beings lose control over the capacity of laboring activity to affirm their being and define their self-existence. Their working condition is always decided by somebody else. And alienation with respect to the social relations of the worker to himself in the form of material satisfaction and to the outer world, to the history and society. So there is an alienation with respect to the social relation of the worker to himself in the form of a material satisfaction and to the outer world, to the history and society. So human being is, the worker is not even able to do justice to himself, is not able to do justice to his fellow society and to the history at large. Workers feel at home when they are not working, and when they are working, they are not at home. A very, very interesting, very powerful statement. Workers feel at home when they are not working. We know that for quite a lot of us, people whom we are familiar with, they don't really enjoy the work. The work becomes a burden on them. They really are frightened about the scenario of having to go to work. Spending a moment in the work is considered to be a kind of punishment for them. So Marx says that this is a tragedy of human beings. Human beings should not be facing. This is the great tragedy, because by definition, human being must be able to find a lot of enjoyment during their work. And if it's not happening, there's something fundamentally wrong. So workers feel at home when they are not working, and when they are working, they are not at home. Reversal of human and animal functions, because the activities which human beings share with animals appeal more human than those activities which mark them off as human beings. Again, the extension of this argument, he makes a comparison between human beings and animals. So when human beings do the kind of animal activities, like like sleeping or having food, then human beings feel more happy, while human beings do certain kind of a human activity, something so central to human beings, something so defining of human beings, that is the productive activities, they no longer feel happy. So that is why there is a reversal of human and animal functions, because the activities which human beings share with animals appeal more human than those activities which mark them off as human beings. Then Marx also brings in a very interesting discussion about alienation from the species activity. This is a very, very interesting take. So he brings in this idea of the species being. The species being to indicate the individual human being and the common essence of humankind. Here, Marx develops a kind of a philosophical argument that human beings as a species have certain kind of an essence, which demarcates human beings from other animals. So a species being to indicate individual human being and the common essence of humankind. Humans not only belong to the same species, but being aware of it is distinctly unique to the species. We make our species our objects and behave towards, is conscious of or relate to himself as to the present living species. Okay? So our existence in this world is not something mechanical. He argues that we identify ourselves as a member of this society, and because of our unique ability, we are able to object this human society in a very objective manner, and we make our species our objects and behave towards it. But we are being aware of its distinctly unique, but being aware of it. Okay? So it's not that we simply exist as human beings, but we understand that we belong to this particular species, and this particular species has a particular destiny not in something given by the God, but as per the Marxian argument, that they are supposed to reach a much more better state of affairs, a state where nobody experiences alienation, a state where there is no class, there is no exploitation. So we are able to identify ourselves and also subject to, are also able to look at the species as if they are the objects of our understanding. And now species consciousness and alienation. So species consciousness as an individual consciousness as well as humanity as a whole. So every human being has a consciousness about himself or herself and also about the consciousness as a humanity as a whole. So Marx argues that human beings needs to affirm, confirm and actualize one's human species essence. This is based on an individual satisfaction of a natural vocation. It is the extent to which the human beings as species being has become himself and grasped himself. Alienation is thus the separation and estrangement of individuals from their human essence. So, human beings feel estranged from the product, from the productive activity, and here Marx argues that human beings are even estranged from their species consciousness because of this very abject, miserable condition. Human being is not able even to realize their species consciousness, that he is able to identify himself with the larger society and then understand its historical role. This is based on an individual satisfaction of a natural vocation, and this natural vocation is very hard to come by in a capitalist society. It is the extent to which the human being as a species being has become himself and grasped himself. Alienation as the failure or inability to actualize one's human essential powers, and this essential power has been seen as the power of labor. So every laboring activity becomes a painful activity. The workers do not enjoy, rather they are exploited miserably, and that prevents them from developing this kind of a species consciousness. The alienation of the working class is the alienation of the whole society. The exploitative relations between capital and labor seeps through the entire social structure, and an inhuman power rules everywhere. So this alienation of the working class is the alienation of the whole society. So that's what Marx argues repeatedly. You can't understand the plight of workers as their own problem, because the workers, as per Marx, workers really represent the essence of humanity. And the alienation of the working class is the alienation of the whole society. The exploitative relation between capital and labor seeps through the entire social structure, and an inhuman power rules everything. So Marx, he imagines a time when a worker works for 8 hours, sleeps for 8 hours, and then the other remaining 8 hours he spends in very important intellectual activities. He reads, he goes for fishing. So he's able to develop as a full human being, not somebody who is under the yoke, not somebody who feels estranged, not somebody who is exploited. So the promise of the revolution is, for Marx, is a promise of escape from the perpetual situation of alienation. So this particular take of Marx towards alienation, this particular argument has been extremely influential. And when capitalism assumes different character, we understand that the working condition, the situation of the workers, it does not get better. When you look at the way in which people work in some of the late capital societies, for example, in a whole set of new situations, the work has been seen as highly alienating. You work only because you need to feed yourself. You need to take care of some of your very basic activities. You no longer enjoy it. You don't even know what you are doing. Even this whole examples of call center workers is often seen as an extreme example of that. The people in India, call center employees who have to work in the night schedules, and they have to pretend a completely different accent and to speak to people whom they don't even see. So these are highly alienating experience as per the Marxian accord. So this materialist turn that Marx provided has been extremely influential in the analysis of this whole concept of alienation, something developed by Hegel and then further developed by Feuerbach. Okay? So we will conclude this session and then we'll continue next class. Thank you.